Good evening and welcome. I'll sit down since I'm actually playing the first numbers. And I will, though, nevertheless offer a few welcoming remarks. This is the final concert of the final season of the Tokyo Creek Festival, and it's nice to see people I have seen here before and some have not. Some I just imagine I've seen before. And we are very happy to be sponsored. It's in your program. I'm just going to read it, though, because there are people who are very close to us, and many for many years. The season co-sponsors, June and Sandy Lee, and Dennis and Gail Mackey. Mackey, also our doctor. The virtual season live streaming is sponsored by Paul Carroll Collins. Program 1 is sponsored by our cousins, who are themselves doctors and chamber musicians, Dr. William and Mary Harbison. And the appearance by Karl Lavine and Mark Bridges. Mark is on the middle concert. Karl's on this concert with Karen Bowe. It's sponsored by Nan Bayer-Mears. And the last concert, the final concert, Tom and Leslie France. Many of those folks, of course, have been with us as sponsors before. We're very grateful. And we are so happy to be here one more time. I'm going to tell you a little bit about the program as it goes. Talking and playing are completely different energies, and the talk energy works for thinking on the spot about something you haven't thought about before, and playing you're trying to do something that's already in goal, in view, and the interruption of the talk, usually it's the talk in your head, is what you don't want to be listening to, but I am nevertheless going to interrupt between the three fugues because they are so different from each other, and because only the most devoted swallow a whole bunch of those fugues in one. We are, all of us who are interested in Bach have been trying for a long time to get a sense of what Bach thought this project was, the thing that he called the Art of Fugue. We know it to be among the last things he was working on. He really was working on two big projects at that point, filling in his fascination with fugue. As you can see, the numbers here, 10, 11, and 14 are a little confusing. There are some canons which have numbers, which are based on the fugal subject, which fill in those missing numbers. He inserts other pursuits into this series, but mainly he's trying to exhaust, I guess, the possibility of big fugues on the same subject. And the subject is the same, though he uses subtle and sometimes rather radical variants of the subject. And I'll talk about that in a minute. He chose, obviously, a kind of a formation which is very apt for the kind of thing he wants to do, which is to write many, many pieces on the same tune. And you've got to have a very adaptable tune, and certainly also one that has a certain fascination of its own. At the same time, he's working on another piece, the B minor Mass. There are two holes in the B minor Mass at that point that he needs to readdress. And we have then, fortunately, the example at the same time that he's been working on these pieces of two pieces in his very last vocal style, which sit, interestingly enough, in that piece next to the very earliest music in that piece, which is from 30 years before. Fascinating that Bach thinks that he can juxtapose two pieces of music from so different moments in his career and still have the listener feel that the continuity is in fact absolutely appropriate, which in fact it is. So I'll say a bit about, first about the Contrapunctus 10. Its character, to me, is surprisingly lyric and not as interested in exploring odd corners of his project as some of the others. And in fact, it seems to, towards the end, the last 2/3 of the piece, really not be bothered by the fugue subject anymore, but rather struck by two sort of, I would say, kind of fantasies, which are then carried through, which are not really derived from the main subject. Almost as if he somehow wanders a few centuries forward to the era of the piano fantasy, the preludes of Schumann and Schubert, and really never becomes very rigorously interested in the subject until towards the very end, where he seems to remember, yes, I'm writing a very serious piece about fugue here. I will leave these two beautiful inventions and just come back to home for a while. It's one of the more pleasant to play, not easy, but pleasant to play because it is so willing to divert itself. It becomes a kind of a daydream about 2/3 of the way through the piece, and the pianist, I think, is very happy to be there. Is the director wishing to speak a few moments? Oh, closer to the microphone.
No, it's good. Are you done? You're going to talk again? You'll talk again?
Yeah. Say one more thing about the tune that you're going to hear. This is the version of the tune that I call the breathless version, that has a little gasp at the beginning of each little fragment. Always the wait and then two short notes. Its derivation from the original tune will, I think, become audible, but at the beginning, that's the subject that we're working with for the real fugal part of the piece. you can see over my shoulder can see that the last page is that very warming part where the pianist is really delighted to come kind of into a meadow after really twisting your hand into every possible uncomfortable shape, trying to figure out how to track these wonderful inspirations that are all about surrounding the tune with new shapes. Number 11, kind of a notorious piece. None of the people that I know that play this piece play it. It's kind of fascinating, and it also, unusually for Bach, kind of runs out of control. I'll show you a couple things about it that lead to this problem. I try to play the piece such that we cruise through some of those, what I call these water treading passages. It's to get back to substance. Even Bach has proportional issues in some of his pieces. He's writing these pieces in a half a day, for God's sake. But this one is quite fascinating. It's the breathless version of the subject. Again, the breath. So the downbeat is always empty, which helps the listener when the texture gets really complicated to pick that voice out. It's the one that's taking the breath all the time. The other voices are tending to go continuously flowing forward, but somewhere in the middle is this ba, ba, ba going on. Eventually, there's a new subject, which causes, I think, a kind of trouble in the piece. It's this one. Scale that he decides to harmonize the second tune with becomes really almost kind of obsessive in this piece. And eventually, the next time that subject comes, he adds another wrinkle, which is the following. Sighing mannerism. It is kind of manneristic, and it takes over a lot of the tracking in this piece, which is getting from major moment to major moment. And I think the performer has to either dramatize and maybe over-dramatize those, or get through them gracefully and move to what I call the downbeats of the piece, and that's what I'm going to try to do. It's a big, relentlessly detailed piece, and it takes a lot of listening, which is, to your mercy, you're not going to be subject to today. But if you ever have a chance to get hold of Angela Hewitt, the greatest of all Bach players in the world, her performance of this piece, it just makes me want to have a camera to see how the heck she did it. show-off phrase. The upper voice tenor voice. The second tune. The chromatic scale in the alto, cascading at double speed. And in the bass, kind of a somewhat annoying generative thing, and they're all happening in the four, in some part of that texture. There is a kind of hubris about writing a passage like that, but let me tell you, this composer has earned it. Anyway, that could have been much more of an adventure than it was. Finally, he gets to the final fugue, and apparently he interrupted quite a bit because he inserted at this point in the sequence, the published sequence, quite a few of these very fancy canons. One voice goes half the speed or twice the speed of another one. One voice catches up and passes another. It's extraordinary, almost kinetic way of thinking about music. But then he comes back to a final fugue, which is the last one he numbers in the book, The Art of Fugue. And it's a very, not surprisingly, very comprehensive piece. It doesn't finish, and its commentary on it says it's been left unfinished because the composer kind of ran out of time. He died. But in fact, it isn't quite that simple, because what he leaves for a final few measures is the thing that the person who would want to go on with the fugue would find most difficult to do. That is, how do you combine the four subjects that he's introduced to that point? And he gives you a passage in which he does so. And this has made it possible, or it certainly made it stimulating for a number of other composers, including our own Gunnar Johansson in Wisconsin, or Sir Donald Tovey. Lots of illustrators, people have written the completion. Kenneth Amos, the wonderful brass player at MIT, did a fabulous one. Takes a lot of work, but the basic idea of the solution is presented. I'll play that first for you. This is where he is going then for, as you can see, a vast expanse of pretty eventful music. Laid in these different subjects, some of them seemingly going at much more density than others. But what he then leaves us with is this. Often described that the name inscription comes at the sort of 11th hour. He plants this pretty early in the sequence. There's also this tune. That's the subject of the quick note fugue, which comes about halfway through the final fugue. So he has the four tunes really laid out ahead. And it's really, in a way, if he feels that he doesn't have much time for whatever else he's doing, and certainly B minor Mass was the first priority at that time. He did give his blueprint to somebody ambitious enough to want to finish this fugue, and there are a myriad finishes of this fugue, of all kinds of quality and with all kinds of effect. I'm going to play the piece as he left it, which starts with probably of all the sequence, the most stately and most airy. The airspace kind of fugue with a lot of big goose egg notes, rather leisurely pace. And eventually it begins to add on, and subject matter of much more density occur. And finally, a very bravado section I like to think of at the end, which is where he introduces his own tune, B, A, C, H, which is not the only piece in which he does that, by the way, but it's certainly an appropriate time for him to do it in this instance. So this is the final fugue, which of course will break off at the point that he proposes a solution to the rest of the piece. his music over there where I couldn't see it anymore. Well, part of the pleasure of these pieces to study is really that they are for an audience of one. The player is the person for whom the pieces really were conceived by the author, and I think it's kind of the closest eye to eye that you get with the composer. Really only after many, many days. And that's really what we wish to present here today. Years ago, John Schaeffer just reminded me of times when we used to have study of a piece rather than just a presentation of a piece. Somebody who had a piece they wanted to talk about would kind of play through it. That's kind of what these pieces are. And anyone, fortunately, because they're cleverly conceived, can start with Fugue 1 and say, okay, they're not so much harder than the well-tempered clavichord. They are. And from there on, you're hooked. Okay. I'm up here now with the mic, so I think I will say a few words about Mozart. Signal. Mozart 454. One of the institutions in New England that plays chamber music were saying that we have a rule that anyone going over 60 miles an hour can't play Mozart. But we were past 60 and we're going to play Mozart. The thing about the music that is so striking every time you arrive at it is that it seems quite the opposite of what you've just heard. Music which is thought of at the moment that is set down so much of the time. And actually that's what we see from looking at the Mozart and manuscripts that we have. Our great friend Bob Levin, who's coming again this year, has seen a million of them, and the way that the voice that he understands, the next thing he understands runs out ahead. And everything catches up in its good time, and many pieces are left, fortunately for Bob Levin to be completed years later, but left in whatever state that moment of freshness disappears, or he gets called away to do something else. But really the onto the page spontaneity is not matched by any other composer, and that's what we hope for when we play.
Fantastic discovery downstairs about this piece, and I want to share it with you. John doesn't know this, of course, but he's told you that Mozart is enchanted with this violinist, Sprinikaki. Yes, can you hear me?
Yeah.
And there's a place in the second movement that's mysterious, and I suddenly realized she says, okay, you're it. And I'll play it for you. It really is. Where is it? Here we go. I can't get to the second movement. There it is. It occurs twice, and it sounds like this.
Shall I play?
No, you're not playing. I want to have the show. Let's see, where is it? I want the last one. Where's the? Oh. Well, oh yes, here it is. That's one of them. It must be here.
Mm-hmm.
you listen for that. I'm a little bit sentimental because John and I have been together for 50 years. Well, how about you get to the second one?
This will be a brief tag. I'm not going to play the whole sonata. Popular demand. My listeners begged me not to play it. They say, wait for a real pianist to play that. So I'm going to play only the last movement. Sort of give you a little bit of an idea what it's about. It's a piece which evolved in difficult circumstances. I was in a long conversation through the COVID crisis with my very dear friend, composer Jim Primash. And even before it was evident that he was becoming ill, I sensed he was becoming ill. It first was manifested in a kind of more psychological realm, but it is reflected in some ways in this piece, in ways I don't want to get too precise about. But this is the last movement of the sonata. It's in 4 movements, all of them fairly brief. Well, I'll just play it as a chord of a tribute to my friend and to close out this first half of the concert. Each of the movements is only about 3 or 4 minutes long. This one is marked. Yeah, and Andante espressivo. I'm going to say a few words about the next two composers on the program. The second one I think will be known to you. The first, somewhat less, but we're extremely pleased to have Harrison Birtwistle tonight's program, I would say to most of the composers I know, he was for many years, if not the most significant composer, right at the top of the ranks. It surprised me a little bit that his death this year didn't make more waves than it did. Certainly, I have always been aware of him as a power in the world of music. You're going to hear a rather private piece in certain ways, but it also sounds to me a lot like the Birtwistle I know. I'd say two adjectives that always come to my mind when I'm listening to Birtwistle music. One is stoic. That's the sense that he keeps some of his emotions in check, but this is because he is by nature volcanic. And that eventually, in small and in large moments, both obviously and quietly, you realize that his nature is extremely bristly and filled with event, and that even when his music is quiet, it is holding in check something very, very strong and very powerful. He's known for big, blasting pieces that sort of knock the walls down. And I feel in this piece, you feel this is a guy who could at any moment knock the walls down. He is instead accusing to harness a kind of energy and density and of thought and a kind of intensity of feeling. And like a lot of very good composers, he gets into worlds which are very private, but also clearly deeply experienced. And that's what I feel listening to his music, that if you want to try to hear all the details, eventually a couple things will happen to you. You will find melody and you will find line, and you'll also be startled a few times. That the vocabulary suddenly enlarges in very startling ways, and you better be ready for it. Haydn is somewhat similar in those ways, that is to say, someone with lots of surprises, but he also is an absolutely good world citizen who speaks very, very much a tongue which he expects to be understood, and has said many times when he's asked about his music, he's gratified by his popularity because he always wanted his music to be felt and acknowledged by large numbers of listeners. That's not a bad admission for a composer. In everything of Haydn, we feel the great generosity of spirit. But I'm glad we're celebrating the existence on the planet of really one of the major figures in Harry Birtwistle. It is a great shame, as I said to my last two points of arrival in the music world, that there's not more being made of the fact that Harry Birtwistle has left the planet this year. So thanks to Karl and Karen for bringing this very distinctive piece to the program. And I'm going to see if Rudy will follow me.
Thank you.